Good morning and welcome to one of the most fabulous sporting locations on the planet. We're high in the Swiss Alps at the St. Moritz bobsleigh track, ready for the start of the 18th Bobsleigh World Championships at this venue. Hello everybody, I'm Martin Haven. I'm delighted that alongside me in the booth here is Canadian women's slider Helen Upperton. Helen, first heat of any championships is huge, but with this track to conjure with, the girls are going to be really excited.
Yeah, this is the longest track in the world and the oldest. It held its first competition in 1904 and has been hosting pretty incredible races ever since. And it is the only natural ice track on the planet right now. So as you can see, we're looking at a POV video heading down these very small kink left-handed corners. There's 14 curves in this track. They're all very uniquely named, a lot of times after very famous bobsleighers from around the world. Long straightaways, the push is very important here. We're heading into wall corner, small pressures, takes a lot of control, very precise feeling, into the snake 1, snake 2 transition, and big right-handed sunny corner, one of the few corners with a support structure behind the snow. Nash-Dixon combination curves after the very famous British bobsledders, gold medalists in 1964. Horseshoe's the most famous corner on the track here. Telephone and Shamrock into a big left-handed Devil's Dyke turn, picking up a lot of speed here. This corner's nameless. Now 4 combination right-handed turns, tree, bridge, leap underneath the train tracks. Gunther Sachs clocking speeds down the straightaway of over 140 kilometers an hour. Big Martineau curve and into Portago, the final bend, and across the finish line.
Well, Helen, one of the things that you notice from this camera point and when you're in the sled is how quiet it is compared to a concrete channel, which all the other tracks are that resonate. Here you're buried into Mother Earth, into these mountains, and it's a supernatural experience to be whistling down here at over 85 miles an hour.
It is. It's so smooth on this track to drive, and it's for that reason it's one of the favorite tracks of all the sliders.
There's the glamour, there's the location, and there's the temperatures. Look at it, minus 14 degrees, up from the overnight low of minus 18. But actually, when you're in the sunshine today, it'll almost be shirt sleeve weather. And that means that the track changes completely as the runs progress.
It's a very, very unique venue. And in most World Cup competitions and World Championships, you will see the top sleds starting off earlier because the track typically breaks down over the course of the race. In St. Moritz, one of the anomalies here is that the track actually speeds up later. So you're going to see the top sliders who drew the last draw numbers for this race. So you have Kaylee Humphries, who's leading in World Cup points, going off 22nd in today's order.
Well, there are 4 heats in every World Championship race, the same as the Olympic Games, and all sleds that complete the heats will continue right up to the final heat when the field will be cut to the fastest 20. And the same will go for the men, where we've got nearly 40 sleds in the 2-man competition. Well, as ever here in St. Moritz, everybody's diaries appear to free up around this couple of weeks in January or February, whenever it's held, and it's such a great location to come. And the track changes every year. It is built by hand, and as you said, there's only 2 corners that actually have, you know, any substantial backing to them, a wall at Sunny and a wall at Horseshoe. And so every year the track changes slightly. So 22 sleds, and the draw was done not randomly, but as you've just alluded to, the number 1 in the World Cup gets to choose where she starts. So she'll start last. Kaylee Humphries will wait and see whether that works out for her. It should do. 22 sleds from a bunch of nations. The one nation with more sleds than anyone else is Germany. Top 3 nations in World Cup rankings are allowed 3 sleds, and that includes Great Britain and the USA and Germany. But the junior world champion in every discipline gets a free pass into the senior worlds, and that happens to be a German slider this year. So we'll get our first view of Miriam Wagner ever on live television, courtesy of the FIBT TV crew. We've got nearly 40 cameras on site here, and we are going to give you unparalleled coverage of one of the greatest sporting events in any winter season. The 18th Bobsleigh and Skeleton World Championships to be held here in St. Moritz, Switzerland, will get underway with Romania's entry. Oana Diacanu crashed yesterday in her 2nd heat of training. That was the 4th and final run, or 6th and final run, rather. And so she will be trying to put that right behind her. Helen Upperton alongside me in the booth. Always a little nervy, jangly moment when you're first off on a track, particularly when you're not used to being first off.
Exactly. These girls are usually starting at the back of the order, but like we said earlier, here in St. Moritz, starting off first is a disadvantage. The track is going to speed up due to the weather, the increased temperature, and the sunshine on the ice. It melts the top layer, creates a faster track. You're going to see the sleds speed up as we get through this start order.
Well, just 23 years old, student from Campina in Romania. Ioana started the season as Romania 1 and has now been overhauled by her junior teammate. 5.91 seconds is the start. The record is 5.53, set in the Swiss Championships on December 30th last year.
So we're seeing the sled. It's going to pick up speed as we go. The first few corners are quite slow. The pressures are very hard to feel, and it is very, very difficult to keep the speed going here. You want to see the sled stay very straight and off the walls in the top section of the track where you build all your velocity. She's heading down into the big corner horseshoe, and the sleds have to go as close to the roof as possible, actually, to get as much speed coming out of the exit.
101.5 kilometers an hour. We'll see them over 105 in the faster sleds as the track gets quicker.
This is a very, very, very accelerating part of the track. They're heading into a 4 combination right-hand corners. A little tap on the wall there. She's going to lose some speed. 137.2. The fastest times, speeds we saw in training were over 144 kilometers an hour.
And into the braking straight at the end of 1 minute and 10 seconds of sliding. Whatever the competition, this is still the longest track, and they are still likely to reach some of the fastest speeds down at the bottom. So 70 seconds, you know, when we look at tracks like Eagles and they're completing it in a whisker over 50, this is a lot more ice sliding.
Yeah, this is the longest track in the world. It's 1,722 2 meters long.
Gets up to the woodwork.
She actually touches the roof with her bunks. The goal actually is that it's very important to not panic if you hit the roof. The sled is going to come down on its own, but you don't want to hit the roof. You do want the height there in horseshoe to be able to accelerate the sled out.
Well, there you can see the Romanians. They've completed the first of what they hope will be 4 heats here in these Women's World Championships. Next up is Victoria Ole and Kelly Denyer. Victoria, one of the junior British bobsleigh sliders. 3 British sleds here for the first time that certainly I can remember in World Championship competition. And Vicky from London originally with a Latvian-built sled. Well, Helen, you know, this, like every other race, the start is going to be so vital. The big starters are going to give themselves an early advantage.
Especially with these 2 small left-handed kinks and the long straightaways. You need to accelerate the sled into this first bend and make sure you're sitting very still and stable down these long straightaways. You usually see some exciting things happening coming down these straightaways if the athletes aren't perfectly still.
52.7 kilometers an hour at the first corner mark. That's still 33 miles an hour. And the green there with her name shows that she is in the lead at the moment on the track.
It's a nice exit out of wall into snake 1. Big right-handed sunny curve. Small brush on the left wall. This is not a bad run for a pretty inexperienced young pilot. Heading into big horseshoe, she's going to head up close to the roof.
Oh, Coach Lee Johnson will be happy with that. Good exit as well, no major slide.
This is a pretty impressive run from this pilot. She's very smooth, lots of nice parallel lines, which is what you need to see here in St. Moritz on this track.
These big high-pressure corners here, those fast 4 right-handers really grind you down into the sled. Top speed, 139, it's 86.6 miles an hour.
She's 2 kilometers an hour faster than the Romanian sled that went before her.
So 109.43 for Vicky Ole and Kelly Denyer. They take the lead at the moment. As I said, first of 4 heats here in St. Moritz, and the brakes only ever used after the finish line these days. John Jackson down there be sliding in a 2-man competition tomorrow. That's him with the Marines hat on.
You can see the replay of the start here as the athletes power off the blocks. Very unique bobsleigh spikes to be able to dig into the ice. You can see how close they come to the roof. You're going to see all the sleds, probably a few actually hit the roof. We saw the Romanians tap the roof on the way through horseshoe.
Well, lots of GB jackets at the top, and Vicky Ole with the lead after her first run So 2 sleds of our 22 down the track now. We're starting to get a feel for this. And next up is Misha McNeil. She's got Nikki McSweeney on the back of the sled. This is Nikki's first time on camera. She only arrived a couple of days ago to push with Misha. They competed in the Junior Worlds. So she, in Junior Worlds and Youth Olympics, has already had a bronze and a silver. And still to reach her 20th birthday.
You hear the commands exchange. The sled was lifted slightly at the start. You don't actually want to see the sled lose contact with the ice. They're very young, inexperienced pilots. Misha McNeil actually had an amazing America's Cup season. She won a few of those races. She's quite a talented pilot, and like you said, very young.
Well, she may be the only competitor in this field that this season has raced in every discipline. She's done America's Cup, Europa Cup, and World Cup races. She has also competed in the Youth Olympics and the Junior Worlds last year, and now she's in her first senior level World Championships.
You can see she's behind her teammate, British teammate, by 5/100ths of a second. She wasn't quite as clean. You can see her touch the left wall, heading through Nash-Dixon, into Horseshoe, nice line, bit of a late exit. Her teammate actually was extremely impressed with the run. She had a very smooth run. Misha's not quite as smooth on this heat, but it's World Championships. We have 4 runs to accumulate the fastest combined time.
Again, experience on this track is so vital, isn't it, of all the tracks, because it does change every year. But she doesn't quite have the experience of her teammates or most of the rest of the field. 0.69 of a second behind, a 1:10.12. That puts her in second place at the moment, in front of the Romanians.
You can see how much the lines on this track affect the speed coming through the bottom part, heading into Martineau. She was only 137 kilometers an hour. Our top sleds, especially in the second run today when the track gets faster, they're going to be up over 140 kilometers an hour, maybe close to 145.
Well, listen, when we're talking about them doing 85 miles an hour, there's a lot of aero comes in as well. Big hit, but the sled lifting up instead of moving forward. That's just a little bit of extra rehearsal.
Yeah, these athletes are, like we said, they're young, they're inexperienced. This is a great event. You can see a late exit off of Horseshoe, heading into Telephone. She's a bit early, the sled bumps going in. St. Moritz is a very smooth track. The goal for these sleds, if you're watching at home, you want to see them parallel and straight in all of the straightaways. That's how you're fast here.
Misha McNeil in second place behind Vicky Ole of Great Britain. Now our second Romanian sled, and this is Maria Constantin with Andrea Grecu behind her. And these two coming onto the World Cup for the first time this year. Andrea, in fact, braked Maria's younger sister in the Junior Worlds last season. And they started the year as Romania 2. They are now very firmly Romania 1.
Like there was a small problem with the communication at the line. The athletes did not hit the sled at the same time. Heading down these kinks nice and straight. This is a part of the track where the pilots are holding their breath. You don't even want to breathe to make sure that your sled stays straight down these long straightaways.
Well, what can the brake woman do to help you in that situation?
Basically sit as still as possible. You'll see that the grooves end about 50 meters down, and if the athletes aren't sitting still completely and the pilot has to have the D-rings in their hand, you're going to see the sled skid around and go sideways. And it's more common in the men's field than the women's because they can run farther. Their velocity into the first corner is much faster.
We're watching film of old races here last night with some of the US bobsledders. They're seeing it in the old days. The guys were running in the 80s still down into corner 1. And they're going, oh, we've got to try that. Well, maybe the World Championships isn't the place to be trying new stuff out, but...
This is quite a smooth run, but she's half a second back from our leader.
Well, she's in front of her own teammate at the moment, Oana Giacanu. 1:37.9, again a little quicker than 2 of the 3 sleds we've seen so far at 85.8 miles an hour.
See the brakes come down underneath the sled to dig into the ice, to slow that sled down as they come up the braking stretch to stop.
We saw the veteran face of Paul Niagu there on the left-hand side, coaching these Romanians. He's a former slider for Romania, and his young son, now 20 years old, Andreas, also slides for Romania. If you look back at some of the old World Championships, Romanians had a big part to play, but they're sort of restarting their program almost from zero.
This is the slower part of the track where the athletes are trying to pick up speed and stay straight. She's heading into horseshoe. You want a nice high line close to the roof. We actually have seen some sleds higher than that so far. Even one of the Romanian pilots tapped the roof on the way through horseshoe.
It just gives you an indication, you know, we're talking of tenths of a second differences in your steering make a big difference in your lines. Great view down on the start area here at St. Moritz, the historic start buildings. This is the Indy 500. This is the Monaco Grand Prix of ice sliding. You have the great ski hills, you have the 4 hills for ski jumping, and you have St. Moritz for the Russians. Anastasia Tambov-Seva and Lyudmila Urobkina are the second of our Russian teams, I beg your pardon.
Anastasia's quite a good pilot. She was a luge athlete before this, transferred into the sport of bobsleigh. She's got great hands, great feel from years of being a sliding athlete in the past.
Well, there's a battle this season between Great Britain and Russia to get enough points to get a 3rd sled in, and the British won out over the Russians. And we're a year away from where, Helen?
Sochi Olympics in 2014. They're actually heading there next week for the first ever World Cup test event.
Tambov-Seva behind our race leader, Vicky Olay.
Heading into the horseshoe corner, nice high line, almost taps the roof, good exit into telephone, nice early transition into shamrock. This is a good run so far, and you can tell it is because she's actually pulled into the lead.
104.4, that's the top speed so far, 65 miles an hour. And now, Helen, you're really accelerating hard through these 4 fast right-handers.
They lost something off the sled coming through those 4 right-hand corners in the bottom, and she's our first sled we've seen over 140 kilometers an hour.
87.5 miles an hour. Now, to auto racing fans, that doesn't sound like an awful lot until you're doing it on sheet ice, and then it really motors.
Anastasia's going to be really happy with that run. That was a nice run. It's put her well into the lead from the field so far.
109.05. Vicky Olay in 2nd place. Maria Constantin of Romania lie 3rd.
We're showing this high line through horseshoe. She's inches from the roof. Nice exit, accelerating the sled into the telephone corner. Early height. That was a great job in that corner from Anastasia.
Well, that big corner can give you such a slingshot down the track.
It's probably, I would venture to say, the most famous corner on this very old track here in St. Moritz.
Absolutely right. Next up is the Belgian Elfie Willemsen with Hannah Marion, a former track cyclist, summer Olympian, and we're going to see a lot of those coming through, particularly in the women's field. And she is behind Elfie Willemsen, one of 2 Belgian girls who were part of a TV program to recruit and train a crew to go to Vancouver.
This team isn't the fastest starters in the world, but actually, although the start is very important, this is a long track, and it's one of the tracks that you'll see athletes with a slower start be able to catch the field on the way down. The short tracks, you just run out of time to be able to do that. She's already in the lead.
Well, she started the same as the Russians, but carried a little bit more momentum.
The velocity at the start is extremely important on a track like this where you're heading down those long straightaways.
Now just 400ths of a second behind. And her speed at tree is going to be indicative of what she's got down at the bottom of the track.
Nice high line again in horseshoe, a little bit too diagonal into telephone. This is a smooth run so far. She's still losing a bit of time to the leaders.
Yeah, she's half a kilometre an hour back on the Russian sled. And at consistent high speeds like this, part of that might be down to the runners that they're using, part to the aerodynamics on the sled, part to the driving line. It's hard to define which is which.
She's just under 140 kilometers an hour, and she'll be back a bit as she crosses the finish line, 0.3 of a second behind our Russian leaders.
She moves into 2nd place, and she is the 6th of our 22 sleds. So Anastasia Tambov-Seva, the leader. There's former Dutch slider Aaron Glass working with the Aussies and a couple of other small nations as well.
You can see the tape on the helmets. The pilots wear that to make sure their visors stay shut in case they knock their heads on the cowling going down the track. You don't want your visor to pop open and fly off. This replay we keep seeing here in horseshoe is phenomenal. The sleds get so much height. They want to be able to get as close to that roof as possible without hitting it to accelerate the sled into the telephone shamrock corners.
But there's sort of 2 parts to that, isn't it? Because it's where the exit takes you into the next corner. You saw the little bit of tape, I think, that came off the Russian sled. He's in the track there.
Just going over the run with the coaches, analyzing, finding ways to be faster the next time they head down the track.
Next up for Canada, reigning world champion Jennifer Cacchetti. After starting driving last year, she rejoined Katie Humphries on the brakes to win gold in Lake Placid, and she with Kate O'Brien now in the Canada 2 sled.
Jenny's a phenomenal athlete, an inexperienced pilot, but like you said, she's world champion from the brakes position last year with Kaylee Humphries.
Great momentum, 53.1, well quicker than anyone else. And of course the goggles, Helen Upperton, that's a Canadian signature, isn't it? We can lay that at Pierre Luder's door, can't we?
Yeah, exactly. She's got a great seating position in the sled, nice and low underneath that cowling. She's tapping the walls. In the top of the track, you have to be clean and off the walls in order to build as much velocity as you can.
Now the Sunny straightens up through Nash and Dixon, and the exit there gives you a very low line out of Horseshoe.
Yeah,
now.
that was much lower than the sleds we've seen before. You build a bit too much pressure, and the pressure actually digs the sled into the ice and can actually slow it down.
Lowest speed at tree since the first sled, and she's gone 1200s back from 500s up.
A little bit of an early exit through that combination bottom corners down there.
139.2, little slower than the Belgians we just saw. At the moment, she's gone from the lead down to third spot. Well, you know, you may have people at home asking, well, if she's really only in her second year of driving, what on earth is she doing in the World Championships? Helen, this isn't like track, this isn't like, you know, throwing the javelin or football or anything else. You can't train for this unless you're racing on ice.
That's true, and although this is Jenny's only her second season competing in World Cup competition, this is her fourth season as a pilot. She raced America's Cups, Europa Cups, and some of the developmental levels leading up to this. So we're seeing here, she had a little bit of rough transitions coming down the track. You can see every time the sleds brush the walls, they're going to slow down. She lost time. She had a great push, and like you said, the fastest velocity we've seen so far, but wasn't enough to keep her in the lead heading across the finish line.
Next up is Olga Stolneva of Russia. She's the second of our two Russian sleds. She's got Margarita Ishmailova behind her, and Stolneva married during the summer to Alexei Stulnev, her teammate in the Russian men's squad. Just 29 years old now, but already an Olympic silver medalist in the 4x100 relay for Russia in Athens back in 2004 Summer Games. We saw Coach Malcolm Lloyd cleaning the ice out of those 400 and odd spikes in their Adidas sprint shoes. That's what stops them doing what you and I would do without them falling flat on their face if you tried to run on this sheet of ice.
You can see the speed and the power of this pilot. Olga is a phenomenal athlete, the fastest pushing, probably the fastest pushing athlete in the Women's Russian Federation right now. These athletes have to be excited. They're heading to Russia soon for the very first test event as we get ready to head to the 2014 Sochi Olympics. Again, a bit of an inexperienced pilot. She's working on her runs, on her races, and preparing for the home Olympics.
Up by 1100s at Sunny, and you can see now the sun just starting to fall on the track. That's what gives the corner its name. Through Nash and Dixon, named after the 64 Olympic gold medalists from Great Britain, the only members of St. Moritz Bob Club ever to have won Olympic gold. And she's opening up an advantage for the speed. 103.9, not quite as quick as her teammate Bobsleigh.
This is a good run so far from this pilot. She's barely in the lead right now, but only some small mistakes so far in the track.
Well, she's nominally Russia 1, but she's gone behind. Anastasia Tambov-Seva has the lead, 140.1, again a little slower, so it's Russian 1-2 at the moment.
The two Russian pilots have been the only sleds so far over 140 kilometers an hour in the track.
Stolneva, I think, with a Latvian BTC sled, and I believe Tambov-Seva using a Vimmer. One of the things that you don't see is big manufacturers' logos on the sled, so sometimes it can be a little bit hard to tell. Well, just a few hundreds between the two teammates, 1200ths of a second. That is the blink of an eye.
Especially over 4 heats. She has a great line in Horseshoe, really close to the roof. You're going to see the sled turn and accelerate out into telephone. Get the riding position. The pilots try to sit as low as they can to make it as aerodynamic as possible in the sled.
There's Anastasia. Olga, close to us. Next up for Australia, Astrid Radjenovic, and her brakewoman Jana Pittman, another summer Olympian, a double 400-meter hurdle world champion. So 2 World Championship gold medals already in this sled, and that's before they get to the start of the ice race.
A bit of a late load from these 2 athletes, but straight as an arrow coming out of the first kink. It's very important on this track to build velocity. 52.7 kilometers an hour, not the fastest, but not too bad.
Well, this is only Jana's 3rd ever weekend on ice, so talk about in at the deep end.
Yeah, it's a tough starting point if World Championships is one of your first events. Astrid actually had one of the faster training times yesterday, so we're expecting some good performances here. Small brush on the wall out of Sunny.
Well, career best result, 7th place in Altenburg a couple of weeks ago.
Nice line out of Horseshoe, nice and parallel into Shamrock.
1:03.9 is good speed as well. She always says her sled's a little old and loose, but on the other hand, it does seem to produce some decent numbers.
She's losing a little bit of time, a bit too aggressive off of the leap corner there. Heading down, reaching 1:39.7, a little bit slower than the Russian sleds. You're going to see her drop a bit more time across the finish line.
Dips her head under the cowl, and again, Helen, you know, that's one of those things that people say, well, really, what's the point? You might win or lose a spot by 100th of a second. That's the point.
Yeah, and you don't often see that so much in the first few heats of these World Championship and Olympic events. Are 4 heats over 2 days. It's a cumulative time to determine our winner. They've got a lot of track to cover over these 4 heats. We're seeing the spikes. There's hundreds of spikes in these shoes that allow the athletes to dig in, push this 170+ kilo sled down the 50-meter start ramp. She's gonna brush the right wall here, coming out of Sunny into Nash. The top of the track is very important to stay off the walls. It's where we build our velocity, and our fastest sleds we've seen so far, 140 kilometers an hour.
Well, next up, the first ever view on live FIBT TV of Miriam Wagner and Franziska Fritz, the reigning women's junior world champions from Germany, and with the green of Saxony, like Kathleen Martini from the Altenburg track.
A lot of head movement from the brakeman, kind of reminiscent of Kevin Kusk, actually. Very, very famous German brakeman.
Well, starting the same as the Aussies, and again, you know, you look at other starters in the field when you're a brakewoman, you go, okay, that's not bad.
You can see the aerodynamic position of this pilot and the cowling in a triangular shape.
She's almost looking to one side of the cowl there. She's so low in the sled.
Nice parallel transition from wall through the snake combination.
This is her first ever senior world championship. She's never started a World Cup race, but she's a very experienced driver nonetheless. So many good Germans, it's hard to break into their World Cup team from the lower divisions. A little low maybe in Horseshoe.
A little bit lower than we'd like to see, but not a bad exit. 105. Fastest velocity so far at the exit of Horseshoe. You're going to see her pull away even more. She's over 2/10 in the lead. Nice smooth lines in the bottom part of the track. We're going to see over 141.5 kilometers an hour, fastest speed so far.
That's 88 miles an hour exactly, and still accelerating, and a new record, 108.73. Now, of course, the track is completely, well, not completely different, but marginally different every year, so the records are set afresh every single season. And she has just set a new track record, so quicker than anybody went in the Swiss Championships in the last 2 days of December.
Yeah, we're going to see that track record be set repetitively over the next 3 heats of this competition.
In fact, we'll probably see it go in this heat several times.
A little bit of a lower line from Horseshoe. You're going to see the pressure keep her a bit to the right. It's not the best entry into telephone, but she has a good recovery as she heads into that corner.
Miriam Wagner and Franziska Fritz are race leaders from Germany. So Wagner and Fritz, the junior world champions, lead a Russian 2-3. We've had 10 of our 22 sleds in the first of our 4 heats here in St. Moritz.
Auf Platz 4, die Belgierin, Williamson Marine, mit einem Rückstand von 64 Sekunden. Auf Platz 5, 64 Hundertstel. Auf Platz 6 Joketi O'Brien, Rückstand 66 Hundertstel. Auf Platz 7 Olaf Daniel, Rückstand 40 Hundertstel. Auf Platz 8 die Rumäninnen mit einem Rückstand von bereits 1,37. Auf Platz 9 McSweeney, Großbritannien, Rückstand 1,33. Und auf Platz 10 die Rumäninnen Diaconu Spataro mit einem Rückstand von 1,65. Meine Damen und Herren, der Damenbob ist noch gar nicht so alt. Es gab Zeiten, da waren die Damen vom Boxsportverband. Allerdings bei der Entstehung des Boxsportes, beim Fünfer- und Achterbob, da waren immer auf dem Bob.
A lot of noise at the top of the St. Moritz track in the Swiss Alps for the first of our two Swiss sleds, Heat 1 of the Women's World Championships for bobsleigh. 30-year-old Caroline Spani, a former brakewoman, is now the driver of Swiss 2. And with 2 years behind her, this is her third year of sliding. I'm Martin Hayden, alongside me, Helen Upperton. Helen, big start from Caroline Spani. She could be really influential in Swiss bobsleigh.
She could, and she is the defending Swiss champion from about a few weeks ago here on this track in St. Moritz. You can see her nice and low, orange visor. That's actually supposed to help with the glare from the sun, which is very important as we get into the later runs here.
You can see there are flashes of sunshine, and it's very brilliant here. You know, we're almost above the tree line. It gets very sunny.
Speaking of sunny, the corner named as she heads through into this Nash-Dixon combination into horseshoe. We're going to see her as close to the roof as possible. Nice high line, and obviously these Swiss sleds have the most practice here on the track. You mentioned before, this is a very unique venue. It's a hand-built track. Every year it's slightly different, so the Swiss team who get the most practice have a home field advantage.
Well, it's not open until early December, but they had the Swiss Championships here in the week off Christmas, New Year. Great lines from Spani, like she's been racing this all her life. 140.9 kilometers an hour. That's the second quickest speed. And, oh, she drops from, well, a massive 1300s up going into sunny, just to 200s behind Miriam Wagner of Germany.
It's not a surprise. Based on that bottom velocity, you head uphill as you go through Martineau and Portago. She was slightly slower than our Russian leaders. Only 200ths of a second behind our leaders. That is a blink of an eye.
Again, we talked a little earlier about tucking your head under the cowl as you come to the line. Let's take a look here.
Nice parallel early entry, a little too tight to that left wall. You can see her bunk brush it, snow spraying through the air. High line coming through there. You can see the back end skidding and breaking away. This track is very delicate, very sensitive steering. You want to be nice and straight and parallel to be fast.
And apart from maybe Calgary, this is the coldest, hardest ice you'll ever race on. And so it's very slippery, this ice. I know that sounds silly. So Jamie Grubel and Emily Azevedo from the USA again, two former ex-track athletes. Jamie ran track at Cornell University. Emily Azevedo was a hurdler when she was at UC Davis.
Great pushing athletes here. Emily Azevedo raced in the Olympics in Vancouver 2010 with Bree Schaff. Push bar is still up. Actually, what happens is if the athletes load into the sled a bit too late, the pilot needs to hold on to the D-rings. They can't drop that push bar until they get through the first kink. Ideally, you want to make sure that you're in and loaded before you get to that corner.
Well, that is classic old style. They used to run into the kink, and the next straightaway, that's where all the bars would be folded back in.
She's still in the lead based off of her push time and velocity. Jamie's actually nursing a back injury right now, so she's not in her best form. She took last season off as well as a pilot, was only sliding mostly in Lake Placid. High line, very close to the roof, a bit of a late exit off of Horseshoe.
Still a slender lead, but the speed's not there, 103.9. And does that mean that she's been steering too hard to get these neat lines?
Yeah, she had a bit of a rough exit of Horseshoe, and that's usually one of the determining factors of the speed in the bottom part of the track.
Will she be at 140 or in the 139s? 139.4, that's 86.7.
Clean lines in the bottom. I think most of the mistakes were made above Horseshoe Corner where she lost some speed. I actually also think the mistake with the push bar and the load had to affect her velocity heading into those top few corners of the track.
Well, she had good velocity at the start. 53.3 is quicker than anyone so far, apart from Caroline Spani of Switzerland, who had a marginally slower start, but good run to open her competition from Jamie Grubel. And of course, you know, conditions are different every day on this ice, and so it'll have felt different from training.
High, so high, she brushes the roof. You can see some snow spraying. Late exit off of Horseshoe as the sled flops off, heads into Telephone. Jamie's a new pilot, pretty inexperienced. I mentioned last year she took the year off. She had knee surgery. This year nursing a back injury. She's been a bit unlucky.
Jasmine Fenlater, a track team member at Ryder, and Asia Evans, who in her first ever season as a brakewoman is already the US National Push Champion. This is another powerful starting team. And Helen Upperton, these summer track athletes, I've been astonished by how quickly they've got into not just getting the power into the sled, but the whole ambiance of sliding. They all seem to be hooked.
It's a lot to learn and a lot to deal with. Bobsleigh is a very, very unique, hard physically on your body, and a lot of track athletes try it and don't like it. And these American girls have done a huge recruiting push. They've got a phenomenal team. 53.3 kilometers an hour, that's a great velocity. As you mentioned, Asia Evans is a phenomenal bobsleigh brakeman. She has a few start records already this year, pushing with Alana Myers.
Yeah, she could be a really big name in the US future. 53.3, 5.59, the fastest start, 53.3 best velocity. She has the lead. It's growing as well. Nice work from Jasmine Fenlater.
Yeah, some small mistakes. She had a little bit of a problem coming out of Sunny. Good line out of Horseshoe, though. 900s in the lead.
104.3, that's almost as quick as anyone we've seen.
We want to see nice parallel lines through these combination right-hand corners down here in the bottom of the track to pick up velocity.
Looking at hitting 140 kilometers an hour, 88 miles an hour. Yes, she's there.
Not the fastest speed we've seen, but perhaps good enough to keep her in the lead.
Oh, clatters out of the final corner, 1100s back. See Todd Hayes, the coach. Brian Scheimer is down at the bottom. Both former Olympians for the USA in men's bobsleigh.
Jasmine, also a fairly new pilot, has had a great season so far. A few medals, especially on their home tracks in Park City, Lake Placid. You can see the Sunny curve. She has a bit of a rough exit, bumps going into Nash-Dixon. It's very important to stay straight, and great line in Horseshoe, really high. The athletes in Horseshoe curve actually sometimes lift the sled towards the roof, past the sled starts to fall on its own, and they steer it off the corner.
It's like a fighter plane diving out of the air. Well, next up is GB1, Paula Walker and Jill Cook. Jill, former women's bobsleigh world champion behind Nikki Minicello 3 world championships ago. Paula Walker, former junior women's bobsleigh world champion.
Paula's best result so far this season, a 6th place finish.
A couple of those, Lake Placid and in Whistler, started the season going gangbusters. Jill was injured then when they got back to Europe, and now back to fighting fitness.
Paula, I think, has got to be one of, if not the tallest female bobsleigh pilot in the field. Trying to keep that sled nice and straight, getting a little close to the right wall, heading into the second kink. 53.0 kilometers an hour, not the fastest velocity. You see the small oscillations of the sled here going through wall corner. You mentioned the sun. You can see the track getting brighter and brighter as we get later on in the morning. As it speeds up, the sun warms up the top layer of the track, melts the ice a little bit, and the track speeds up. You want a late draw. The later you're off on this track, which is different than any other venue, the faster you should be able to go.
Tap from Nash to Dixon, but a good run through Horseshoe, and look at the speed as a result. That's the slingshot effect that she was looking for. 104.4, only one sled has gone quicker, and that's the Swiss Caroline Spani.
Bit of a hard steer in bridge curve.
Is she going to be able to close on the leaders from 500s to 600s back, 1400s away? Speed's not there, 139.4.
Brush on the wall, heading into Portago. Ducks her head.
109.02. P-Gun on the left is the British coach.
The British Bobsleigh Federation, actually in general this year, having a great season, especially in the four-man.
There's John Jackson at the back, helping with the sled.
You can see the power of these athletes. The sled lifting slightly out of the grooves. The grooves are there to be able to keep the sled going straight while these athletes are pushing. You can see the exit of Dixon here. She's getting a little close to that right wall. She brushes it, pushes the nose away. It's not the best entry into Horseshoe, but she had a great velocity coming out of that curve. This is heading into the finish curve. Into Portago, she brushes the right wall, and you can see she lost a bit of speed. Messages to family and friends watching back home.
Next up, USA 1, Alana Myers and Katie Ebeling. Alana, Georgia girl who played college softball. Katie Ebeling from volleyball. It constantly amazes me the wide range of athletes that end up doing ice sliding. Who could ever have thought as a volleyball player you'd end up doing this crazy stuff?
I predict this is the fastest start of the heat from Alana Myers. She's the, wow. 5.50. That's a push record on this track this season. Alana Myers is the best pushing pilot in the field. She was a phenomenal, phenomenal athlete.
Well, like so many of the current generation of drivers, started as a powerful brakewoman, started learning how to drive, and has turned into a very powerful force in women's bobsledding.
At her first World Championships last year in Lake Placid, she shocked the crowd, won a bronze medal. It was a phenomenal race. She's got great experience. Nice high line in Horseshoe, good exit into Telephone, and she's 0.4 of a second in the lead.
She's the 15th of our 22 sleds. Great speed at the bottom as well, 104.8. That's equal to our leader, Miriam Wagner of Germany.
Nice parallel lines from Alana. She's really maximizing that start advantage that her and Katie had at the top of the track.
She is just pulling away. 141.4, 87.9 miles an hour.
Great run, track record. Great run from Alana Myers. Good start to her four-heat competition here at the 2013 World Championships.
Absolutely right. What a great run from Alana Myers. And that's the sort of performance that gives you great confidence that you've got the feel that you need.
Yeah, it's really takes a lot of weight off the pilot's shoulders to put down a nice first heat. They've got 2 days of racing. You can see how high she is. She brushes the roof. You can see the snow spraying. Great exit out of Horseshoe. Nice and early into Telephone.
Well, that's the secret. You come late off Horseshoe, you can hit everything in sight or come right up the middle. And Alana Myers came right up the middle to take the lead by a big margin from Miriam Wagner and Caroline Spani.
Just giving the girls behind her some work to do.
Big cheers at the top of this St. Moritz track for Fabienne Meyer of Switzerland with relatively newcomer Elisabeth Graf on the back of this sled. Fabienne Meyer, former junior world champion in women's bobsledding, 10th in the Vancouver Games. It's 5 years ago now. She was the toast of Swiss bobsledding when she won the junior world championship. She's got world championship pink fingernails, I noticed.
She does. You hear the crowd and the cowbells, the home field advantage cheering her on. 5:65 push time. They are not the strongest starters, but like we said, they have a home field advantage here. They've been sliding on this track since it was built in December.
Well, she already started 0.15 of a second behind Alana Myers. She's going to need all of this 1.5 miles of ice to catch her.
Yeah, she's got a lot of track to work with, but a lot of work to do to catch up to our leaders. Fabian's had a pretty good season so far. 3 medals, a silver in Winterberg is her best result. Nice smooth lines. You can tell she's an experienced pilot, especially here on this track. A little bit of a lower line from Horseshoe, but nice entry into Telephone.
But the gap is growing. 1:04.8, only as quick as Alana Myers. She will not catch the leader, so she is already down to 7th, now back up to 5th place. Can she make it into the top 3 at the moment? Still 7 sleds to come. 1:41.6, yeah, a fraction quicker than Alana Myers, but she'll still be 0.4 behind. Didn't close a fraction in those last 2 corners.
We said there's 3 parts to bobsleigh that get you on the podium. You have to have a fast push, good equipment, and a great driver, and they're missing the push right now in this Swiss women's bobsleigh program.
Now, the unique shape of these Swiss-built Citia sleds definitely can post quick speeds at the bottom of the track off almost any start.
You can see the athletes power off the block, snow spraying, they're nice and low, digging in. They're gonna load into the sled as quickly as they can heading into the kink. This is such an important part of the track. It builds all the speed for the bottom. She was a little bit on a lower line, but a nice parallel entry into Telephone.
Maybe she thought she needed that line to get the exit right, and that's to keep the speed that you've built with that height in Horseshoe.
A lot of it's based also on the entry. The position you have going into the curve determines how much height you can get in the corner.
6 sleds remain in the first of 4 heats in the Women's Bobsleigh World Championship. Next up for Austria, Christina Hengster, 26-year-old from Axams, just outside Innsbruck. Started siding back in 2008. Inga Versen behind her. First World Cup race was in Eagles last week. She's a university student, so she's having a week off lectures to come and slide in the World Championship.
Not a bad break from school. They started over 2/10 behind our leaders. We said before, the push is so important. She's got a lot of work to do in the track to catch up to our leaders. It's a tough job.
Best result of the season for her came in the opener at Lake Placid. 4th spot, just a fraction of a second off the podium. And that shows that she's a good driver, but she gets Nash and Dixon wrong.
Yeah, small tap heading into Horseshoe. She's pretty smooth, pretty nice lines, but she's losing time, and it's mostly based off of that start deficit.
Well, she was 11th fastest at the start, already up to 8th place, but the speed is probably not going to allow her to progress much further. 1:03.7 under 65 miles an hour. Down at the bottom, just over 1:40.5.
Yeah, big bang coming out of Gunter Sachs' curve. Ducks her head, crosses the finish line, quite a ways back.
1:08.98. Swiss coach Manfred Meyer not going to be over-thrilled with that. 6th position for them. Alana Myers, the USA, the leader, from junior world champion Miriam Wagner, and the top Swiss Caroline Spani, ahead of Fabienne Meyer, her teammate. They are 3rd and 4th. We have our fastest 5 sled still to come, though, Helen, and bit wavy this run.
High line in Sachs. She's going to hit that right wall, lose a bit of her bottom velocity. She was not the fastest speed, and she's just going to lose time as she goes uphill through Martineau and Portago.
Sun already on the bleachers at the top of the start area. Lots of sunbathing going on there, but not for the athletes. Here is Sandra Kyriasis. Last time the World Championships were here, the German woman won by over 2 seconds, going away from her teammate Kathleen Martini. And last week won her first race in nearly 2 years. Prior to Eagles, last race she'd won was here, St. Moritz, February 2011. The whole of last season, she went winless. In fact, she fairly often didn't even see the podium. But it seems that with Franziska Bertels, her brakewoman, Sandra Kyriasis is back in form at the moment.
Commands exchange between the pilot and brakeman to coordinate that hit onto the sled.
It might be a little old to teach her an old dog new tricks, but I could see that Sandra could benefit from starting on the front handle instead of running up to hit it, she almost stops dead.
Yeah, the women, it's a lot tougher. The women and the men's sled weights are the same. It's over 170 kilos to try get moving from a standstill.
With the women, there tends to be a lot less beef hitting the sled than there is with two big, tough guys as well.
Exactly. Sandra Kyriasis, you're going to see some of the smoothest lines in the track. She's been a dominant force in women's bobsleigh for over a decade.
She was 7th at the start, 4th at Sunny.
Going to check this velocity coming out of Horseshoe. If she has a good speed, great velocity, 105.6. She's trying to reel in Alana Myers, who had a huge start advantage over her.
As quick as we have ever seen. Now, habitually, the FES sleds the Germans used were not best at top speed down at the bottom. They've rectified that in the last couple of years, and she's 142.
And she's closing the gap. It's going to be close as she crosses the finish line.
She could be within a few hundreds. She's 1200s back from the leader. Christoph Langen happy with that.
Yeah, that deficit was because of the push. She actually closed the gap coming down the track. It's very difficult going through those straightaways after the push to reel in somebody with a start advantage like Alana Myers. They have their work cut out for them.
And blue hat René Spies, and at the back of the sled, Matthias Höpfner.
Watching the start, timing was a little off between the pilot and the brakeman. You can see them digging the sled out, and she's heading down. We have the fastest velocity at the bottom. Nice clean lines, nice 142.1 kilometers an hour, huge velocity. Great lines from a very experienced pilot.
Well, last week, Breck woman Franziska Bertels had her first ever win in a bobsleigh senior division race behind Sandra Kyriasis. Next up is Kathleen Martini. 2 years ago, she was the women's bobsleigh world champion. She's got Stephanie Snyder on the back of the sled, and again, the lime green colours of her native Saxony proudly displayed on her FES kit.
The goal for these German pilots is to get as close to Alana Myers at the start as possible. She's slightly faster than her German teammate Sandra that went just before her. Nice and straight through those kink curves, but already behind in velocity and behind in push time.
Yeah, 564 is going to be tough when Alana Myers started 555.
It's a huge deficit to try to catch up. Bit early into Snake 2. We're starting to see the more experienced pilots here going off later. The track gets faster here in St. Moritz as the race goes on. It's a bit of an anomaly. Good high line in Horseshoe, nice entry into Telephone.
Up to second place at this spot, and faster than Kyriasis. She is ahead of her teammate.
Great speed.
The sleds are the same. This is the drive, and 1 minute later of track conditions.
You're gonna see, we need to see this bottom velocity over 142 in order for her to catch Alana Myers.
Oh, and a tap there. It's 141.5. She's not going to catch, and she might drop to third by the line. Is it going to be Martini or Kyriasis? It is still Martini. 300s in front of Sandra Kyriasis.
Great run from Martini to close that gap to only 900ths of a second.
Well, our top three sleds covered by 1200s. Fourth place, Miriam Wagner, 4300s back. 900s to Rückstand. Yeah. So she's disappointed. She knows that's so close.
We mentioned before, you can see Martini starting at the bar to try to get as much push as she can. They have a start deficit to Alana Myers. They need to get those pushes closer to our leaders.
You know, you watch the old starters and they're rocking the sled backwards and forwards to get the rhythm.
This is in the bottom portion of the track where she loses some velocity. She brushes that right wall heading into Martineau.
Well, we always say it's worse to have a touch when you're going slow than when you're going fast, but here it's bad to have a touch anywhere. 3 sleds to go. Esme Campus of the Netherlands with Judith Vis behind her. Again, Esme with Judith have produced some really nice starts this year. And there's former women junior world champion, senior world champion rather, who is coaching them, Nikki Minicello.
Again, we need to see the push time as close to our leaders as possible. It's in the 50s, has been our fastest start. Good load from both athletes. 561, a little bit closer to Alana than the German sleds, and nice and straight heading through the kinks.
See how strong the Dutch are. They've outstarted all three German sleds. 4th place at the start.
Esme's been very fast in training here this week. She's had a great season, a few 4th place finishes just off the podium. I know she'd love to see a medal around their necks here in St. Moritz.
Yeah, the gap to the podium has been coming down to now into single hundredths of a second.
Really nice lines so far, nice and smooth off the walls. Great entry into horseshoe.
2nd position at the moment for the Dutch sled.
Still 17 hundredths behind our leader, a little bit slower velocity on a horseshoe than the Germans.
Well, Ilana Myers was 1:04.8, so she is actually traveling faster than the American at this stage.
We should see this gap close. The question is whether it will close enough to put her in the lead.
The Flying Doctor, 1:41.4, same as Kathleen Martini. And is this going to leave her in second? No, just behind Martini and Kyriasis. 15 hundredths cover the top 4. But again, that was a nice-looking slide from the Dutch doctor.
And as we said before, these sleds going off now, later in the order, 20, 21, 22 in the start draw, they have an advantage because of the weather. It's very strategic here in St. Moritz about the draw and the start position. We'll see that track record fall more and more as we get into the second heat. Good push from these athletes, only a few hundredths off of our leaders. It gives them a chance to try catch them in the track. It's a lot of track to cover. They had a great entry into horseshoe, nice high line. 3rd fastest velocity at the exit.
Well, 2 sleds still remaining as we have Ilana Myers of the USA, our 1st round leader at the moment. There's Judith Vis and Esme Campus of the Netherlands lying in 4th place. 2 to go, including Germany's Anja Schneider-Heinze with Lisette Turner behind her. Now, if you're looking for a fast German start, this is where you look. Anja, former stalwart of the German women's braking squad.
I expect this push to be in the 50s as well. 5:62, slightly off. They were actually outstarted by the Dutch, which is quite surprising. Good lines coming through this top part of the track, nice and straight and parallel.
Not as good momentum as the Dutch either, only 5th at the moment.
As you mentioned, Anja has a lot of years of experience, gold medalist from the Torino Olympics on the back of Sandra Kyriasis' sled, switched to the driving seat and has had a lot of medals and a lot of success. You can see her steering slightly, heading into horseshoe, good high line. Great velocity in this heading into the bottom part of the track. Faster than the leaders. Hopefully she'll be able to close the gap, 1700 separating her from the fastest sled.
She's in 4th place, just ahead of Esme Campus of the Netherlands. So this is going to put 5 sleds within 15 hundredths of a second of each other. 1:42.2, very good speed indeed.
She'll be within 1/10 of our leaders, crossing the finish line 700ths of a second.
Well, the bottom part of the track there, she really drove superbly.
Yeah, such nice lines, so parallel. Here in St. Moritz, you don't want to even hear or see the steering. It's very delicate track. There's not a lot of driving. And as you mentioned, we had said before, it's very important to stay off the walls in the top part of the track. Here in St. Moritz, it's important to stay off the walls everywhere. It's a track where very minimal mistakes will be allowed in order to stay in a podium position. Great line in horseshoe, just a few inches off the roof, and she had one of the fastest velocities at the exit, which set her up for a great bottom portion of the track. You can see how nice and parallel and straight. The runners aren't moving at all, and she has the fastest speed in the bottom of the track. 142.2 kilometers an hour, and it put her only 700ths of a second off of our leaders.
Well, Kathleen Martini will have looked at that and known that her tap cost her dearly. Now then, our reigning world champion and Olympic champion, 6 times a winner this season with new brakewoman Chelsea Valois, Kaylee Humphries of Canada has become the women's bobsledding benchmark. Let's see what she can produce. She started too as a brakewoman after giving up on being an alpine skier. Well, alpine skiing's loss is Canadian bobsleigh's gain.
This should be the closest team to Ilana Myers at the start. I expect a in the 50s push from Chelsea and Kaylee. 5:52, amazing start time. Great job from this team. Kaylee has got to be the lowest seated pilot in the field. field. She barely is peeking over the sled, and she's one of the few athletes that wears goggles, actually, compared to the rest of the field, which are all in visors.
Yeah, she looks like a Florida grandma peeking up over the wheel there.
Kaylee is definitely the favorite for this competition. She's 200s in the lead already and has already passed Alana from the start deficit.
The start deficit is really marginal for Kaylee, and now she's got to use her world champion and Olympic champion skills. She is creeping away inch by inch. 1:05.0, that's quicker than Alana Myers, the leader. Nice
speed, and it's because of a great line out of Horseshoe. Kaylee has medaled in every World Cup so far this year, 6 of them gold medals.
700s in front, a 1/10 of a second, 1:41.7, not the quickest, but it's enough to take the lead after the first heat. A clean exit there as well,
and a
new track record.
Which is what we expect to see from the reigning Olympic champion and world champion, and the pilot who's been the most dominant in the women's World Cup field so far this season.
Coaches Stefan Bosch and Graham Richardson didn't look entirely unwhelmed by that. A really nice run from Kaylee Humphries.
And a good way to start a 4-heat competition, to come out and lead. She has 3 more heats to go, and these races are all about consistency. Chelsea should be really proud. She's a new brakeman this year. She actually came in really late into the fall. She didn't have a lot of practice. She's been doing phenomenally.
Yeah, she's been never off the podium in her entire bobsledding career.
It's pretty good statistics for a new brakeman.
Well, big start and great driving skills, and that is exactly what you need. You know, if you want to see how it's done, you always go back to Kaylee Humphries. The same that for a decade we've been doing with Sandra Kyriasis. The coaches are going to find it hard to critique that. But as a driver, Kaylee will be thinking, didn't quite get that right, didn't quite get that right. There's always something you want to smooth out.
Yeah, she's a very critical pilot. It's why she's so consistent, and she's been improving so much over the last few years that she's been driving. I think this is her 7th season as a pilot.
Look at that, top 6 sleds covered by a fraction over 1/4 of a second, and then there's a big gap back to Miriam Varga, Caroline Spani, and the rest. All 22 sleds safely down the track. No worries at all for them, and they will all go back a second time. And to see some of what the old days used to look like, an old Feyerabend sled. Fritz Feyerabend, one of the great drivers, started building sleds many years ago, and you can see with their +4s, their chunky knits, and their old-fashioned helmets, the crew ready with a steering wheel.
This is one of my dreams as a pilot, to take one of these down. It's on my to-do list.
Well, that's going right back to the old-fashioned bobsledding where 2 old sleds were just roped together. Fantastic stuff. Always plenty of pomp and pageantry here at St. Moritz. Always plenty of speed and excitement here at St. Moritz. Wherever you look, there is something going on. That is the first of our 4 heats in the Women's World Championship. Stay with us as we get Heat 2 underway shortly here as well. Join Helen Upton and me, Martin Haven, the rest of the crew, when we return.